I move that the question be now put.
I'm going to give the honourable member David Clark a call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome the support from my colleagues. Mr. Chairman, this bill seeks to protect individual rights and freedoms. Some of the principles outlined in this bill are ones that we could support on this side of the House. But as soon as we get into the detail, we find it fails to strike the appropriate balance between privacy and security, as far as we can tell. It's a permissive, sloppy piece of legislation that will see New Zealanders able to be spied on in their homes without the checks and balances one would expect of this kind of major legislation going through the House. It is the partner bill to the GCSB bill, but it adds the powers that make this bill able to be carried out in a more full way. The bill does not meet the needs of ordinary New Zealanders. It hasn't passed the tests of legislation that should be in this House. It gives ministers extraordinary powers, and it should not pass. It's not clear in many aspects of the bill what is actually meant by the bill. The definitions are poor. We're told national security is added. It's added in the title of the bill. We find the word security, and yet national security is not defined in the bill, other than to say it relates to economic interest. And when it comes to economic interest, we're not told what that might be or how that is defined. And indeed, debates on matters of economic interest were not allowed to happen in the Select Committee. So we can see the intention of the government is to shut down the debate, to not define the terms, to grant extra powers to the government to spy on New Zealanders in their home, and to fail to provide the checks and balances that would bring this into a way that is acceptable for New Zealanders, because New Zealanders do value their security. Don't get me wrong, New Zealanders do value their security, but they value their privacy also. Ordinary New Zealanders want checks and balances in the system so that they can know that when they conduct their activities online, when they conduct their activities on the telephone, when they go about their ordinary business relating to their families, relating to their business contacts, that they are not being spied on unnecessarily in a way that they cannot respond to, nor can they defend themselves. Mr. Speaker, this is a terrible piece of legislation. We find that the ministers receiving draconian powers are referred to in Clause 13. They're the Minister in charge of the Security Intelligence Service, that's Mr. Key, whom we found perhaps to be a little untrustworthy in this legislation arena. The Minister responsible for the Government Communications Security Bureau, and the Minister of the Police. Any one of these ministers, without any real check or balance, can enact this legislation to spy on just about anyone. We've heard in the broader debate that the questions raised about what constitutes network provision. Who can be spied on and who can't? That is poorly defined in the legislation. It seems any school network, any classroom network can be spied upon at the whim of a minister without any recourse to those involved defending themselves or raising legitimate questions before an independent panel. We've already seen with the GCSB bill a range of activities take place that were just beyond the pale for ordinary New Zealanders. The spying on Kim.com was legalised by this government. The appointment process around the head of the GCSB contained a number of anomalies that have not made for comfortable exchanges in this House, and the person overseeing all of these and the many memory lapses is the Prime Minister John Key, who is responsible for the Government Communications and Intelligence Services. Now, we know in this House that these powers that we are enacting here ought to come with accountability. This Parliament here has the responsibility of enacting legislation that has appropriate accountabilities in it. We carry that burden, and members on this side of the House have made the argument over and over and over again that this legislation needs to be tidied up so that it can be passed in a way that looks out for the security interests of New Zealanders without crossing that bridge into being an unnecessary breach of their right to privacy in their own homes. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot support this legislation in its current form. We cannot see that this government is doing due diligence, nor that it is actually caring about the concerns of ordinary New Zealanders. It's typical of a government that is increasingly out of touch with ordinary New Zealanders. We saw them today in the House trying to say that things were getting better that things were getting better for ordinary New Zealanders at the same time as they were saying that tax had gone down for the very wealthiest New Zealanders, whilst overall the tax take was going down.
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
I
Chairman.
call the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to focus to start with, in particular, on the supplementary order paper